Despite the miracle win on Sunday against the New York Football Giants, I do think it is time to have an uncomfortable conversation about the Denver Broncos based off of what we saw for the first three quarters and what we saw going back to even the Jets game. There are two major problem areas the Denver Broncos still have. One being the penalties and two being the lack of balance. Welcome in, Broncos country, to the Broncos Breakdown by Chat Sports. My name is Moose. On today's episode, we're going to go through these Broncos problems, but the thing that I want to at least make you well aware of right now is that I am not discrediting the comeback whatsoever. I want you to get that out of your minds for just 1 second. Let's look at everything outside of the comeback. So we'll eliminate the fourth quarter for right now, and we'll look at every other problem area up to this point. Now, I know what you're probably going to say. You can't discredit part of the game because it is part of the game. I totally understand that. However, if we go back and look at the game under a microscope, I think we can all agree there are some areas we definitely need to clean up. Now, before I do that, I want you to remind you, to subscribe for Broncos Dubs. Yesterday was the perfect example of why you hit that subscribe button. We are well on our way to 46,000 new subscribers. You got to hit that bell icon, select the all option, and never, ever miss a time that we post. So let's start with the penalties. This is bad. Against the Giants, he had 12 for 127. Against the Jets, he had 6 for 37. Against the Eagles, 12 for 121. And then week 4 against the Bengals, 7 for 72. So every other game so far, you're looking at almost 100 or more yards in penalties. In fact, in the last 4 games, 37 penalties have been accepted against the Denver Broncos. That's not even including the penalties that opposing teams have declined, which you could probably look at another 3 or 4. So it's probably closer to 40 or 41 total penalties in the last 4 games. That is outrageous. Now, is every single penalty an actual call? No. The refs also get it wrong. I'll give you one prime example. That penalty on Riley Moss yesterday was absolute bullshit. It was textbook coverage from Riley Moss, rolling down the right sideline, keeping his back turned, basically hand fighting with the New York Giants wide receiver, and then at the last second, turning around, adjusting his body to coverage, and then swatting that ball away. It was perfect coverage from Riley Moss. And yet, because the New York Giants wide receiver falls down, the refs see that, they throw the flag, and boom, the Giants score. But here's the reality of your situation if you're a Denver Broncos fan and a Denver Broncos player. The Broncos play hyper-aggressive, especially on defense. And they also have complex play calling from Sean Payton. So with that hyper-aggressiveness and complex play calling from Sean Payton that sees a lot of different motion, it seems a lot of different cadences, the problem might not get fixed. This might just be a penalty-ridden team. And look, I take no pleasure in saying that, and I don't want that to be the case. I want the Broncos to play more disciplined football, but we've been saying the same thing over and over again, and nothing gets fixed. Every single week there is a penalty problem, and this goes back to week 1 against the Tennessee Titans. In fact, I'm going to give you a little quote that Broncos Wire wrote. Here's what they said about the penalties that the Broncos were facing. Overall, if you ask Broncos fans if the team was improved over years prior, no fan would ever disagree that things are better. It's absolutely true. This is a much more impressive and talented football team. The talent and execution has improved, but what about the discipline? Too often, big-time plays are called back because of doofus lining up in the neutral zone or illegal formation penalties. Stop covering the tight end. That's, obviously this is going back a couple of games. Penalties are drive killers and rhythm disruptors. There's been way too many of them in this young season. As a result, games that should not have been close have been closer than they should have been, or a different outcome change because of the sloppy and incredibly costly penalties. This was written, by the way, before the Jets game. And then the Jets game happened, tons of penalties, and then this game happened. Tons of penalties. And remember, not every penalty is called equally, right? You could look at this and say the refs were hyper aggressive against the Broncos. I don't know if I could disagree with that. I don't know if I can agree with that. All I know is every single week, the Broncos have more and more penalties than the team they play. And I'm not going to lie to you. You might be able to get away with that against the New York Jets, against the Cincinnati Bengals. You will not get away with that down the stretch of this football season where it only gets harder. The next 5 games in specific, you're going up against a very good offense in the Dallas Cowboys, a very capable Houston Texans team. The Raiders, okay, they're not good. The Chiefs playing the best football of their entire 2025 season, and then the Commanders, once they get Jaden Daniels back, who knows? He could go off and have himself an explosive game. So right now, the main problem for the Denver Broncos is undisciplined play on both sides of the football. And again, we can only talk so much about how it needs to change, and it never does. So that's why my concern level for the Broncos penalty problem right now is at about an 8 or 9. It's bad. It's really, really bad. This is the most penalized team in the National Football League. You just went up against the most penalized football team in the National Football League, and you crushed them in penalties, and not in the good way. So it's just one of those things that it's got to fix itself or it doesn't. It's not a real, there's no advanced metric on how to make that better. You just have to be more disciplined. You can't commit the same penalties. You've got to be smarter in your mental mistakes. You cannot make them. Now, coming up, we're going to talk about the lack of balance that the Denver Broncos have, specifically on the offensive side of the football. And I'm not going to lie to you, there are some statistics that will lead you to believe that this has got to change sooner rather than later, because when you go up against these high-powered teams like the Chiefs right now, like the Dallas Cowboys offense, like the Green Bay Packers, or even the Jacksonville Jaguars who are playing well, you will absolutely lose those football games if they don't get cleaned up. Now, before I do that, I got to tell you about our friends over at Prize Picks. You and I make decisions every single day, but on Prize Picks, being right can actually get you paid. You don't want to miss any of the excitement this football season on Prize Picks, where it is good to be right. You can now follow other Prize Picks players directly on the app and copy their lineups in just one click. Whether it's a friend or a celebrity partner like producer Dylan on the ones and twos, or just someone whose picks you like, you got to hit that follow button and check out every lineup they create in the brand new feed tab only on Prize Picks. It's very simple to play. You pick your player, their stat projections, the more or the less on that, and you watch your money multiply. Download the app today. Use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. It is good to be right. So let's start with what the quarterback had to say, right? Because there's nobody on this team outside of the head coach, Sean Payton, that understands the Broncos' offensive woes quite like Bo Nix does. Now, he was asked specifically about not only the game on Sunday against the New York Giants, but also the Denver Broncos' problems through the first 3 quarters. Here's what he had to say. You're not where you want to be. And at some point, I knew we would have done it sometime before in the fourth quarter. At some point, we're going to go down and score. Now, maybe that's too late. We may not score enough, but at some point we're going to do it. And then we did it. So he's mixing the good and the bad there. He goes on to say, you got a good drive, you got a good drive there at the end of the third, scored quickly in the fourth, and then it's almost like once we scored and got the 2-point conversion, we knew how to play all of a sudden. So it was just, I don't have any answers, but we just kept fighting. So there's some good in there and there's some bad in there. The good news is that clearly Bo Nix right now is a momentum player. I think that's the best way you can categorize his type of game in 2025. He's a momentum player. Bo Nix is the type of player that when he's playing great, he's outstanding. When he's cold, he is ice cold. And there's not much in between. How many times this year have we said Bo Nix was just okay? It's not often. It's either Bo regressed a little bit this week or Bo was on fire this week. I mean, against the Indianapolis Colts, played great. Against the Cincinnati Bengals, played very good. Fourth quarter against the Eagles, played great. Fourth quarter against the Giants, played great. I mean, there's bits and pieces. There's fragments in time where Bo Nix is playing awesome. And that's highlighted by the statistics that he put up against the New York Giants. These stats don't lie. This feels like the tale of Bo Nix in 2025. It might as well say Bo in 2025 because there are times when Bo is ice cold and then turns it on like that. So I'm not going to say that that's something that's a negative all the time because clearly you want your quarterback playing his best football in the fourth quarter. But you can't say it's a good thing either. Now, I did say that there was this lack of balance, right? So here are the 5 keys to what I've seen so far against the Giants, but kind of as an overarching takeaway in the 2025 season as well. The first thing is, against the Giants, you had 4 straight passes to start the game. That is literally the definition of a lack of balance. You go full speed ahead with 4 passes, 4 straight incompletions too, by the way. So it's not like 4 straight passes, 4 for 4. It was 0 of 4. And at some point, you start to think to yourself, hey, maybe we should start running the ball a little bit more. But it wasn't just the 4 straight passes, and those incompletions weren't entirely on Bo Nix because you had dropped passes from Troy Franklin and Nate Adkins. Cortland Sutton had an early drop. So the wide receivers had just as much in that hand as Bo Nix did. There were 3 drops, those 3 specifically, that I can name right off the top of my head. There might have been more. I'd have to go back and watch the tape. But those 3 specifically. Troy Franklin continues to have drop problems, so we've got to get that figured out. And maybe he's just a player that will never have the greatest hands. I don't know. Maybe that's a part of his game that he needs to develop, is that hand-to-eye coordination. And then, of course, back to Bo a little bit, the missed throws downfield, the missed passes. His deep ball accuracy is just not there right now. Dan Orlovsky talked about it with his feet not getting set. I think he just doesn't have the touch yet. I think he overshoots his wide receivers all the time. He sees a player, and he's like, okay, I got to throw this 45 yards, and ends up throwing it 55 yards. It's not quite there yet. So that's on Bo. But now let's go to Sean Payton, because holy frickin' A, man. The screens. I think it was Bossman Jay, fan favorite of the show, that texted me at some point today or yesterday. It was one of the two. And he said, Sean Payton is always good for like 30 screens a game. And it felt like this was the entire playbook right here. This nice little screenshot for you. This is a Madden play, by the way. I'm not going to lie to you. I understand if you're a Sean Payton defender that Bo Nix's accuracy downfield causes Sean to call more screens. And I understand as a Bo defender that in order for Bo to get better at throwing the ball down the field, you've got to let him throw the ball down the field. There is no correct answer in that equation. There's gray area. It's not black and white. So Sean Payton cannot continue to let Bo stretch the ball down the field if he's not connecting, but you can't continue to call these screen passes because defenses are also figuring it out. They're figuring out your offensive scheme, and they're playing you at the line of scrimmage. They're pressing you. And that's what the Giants did yesterday. And then, of course, this one's entirely on Sean Payton, the last lack of balance key. The questionable short down calls. Namely, you are 1st and 5 on the Giants' 5, threatening to score. The first play is a run play up the middle. You get down to the 2, right? J.K. Dobbins runs that ball to the 2. You then proceed on 2nd, 3rd, and 4th down to throw passes. You tried that little trickery play where Garrett Bowles goes out into the end zone. That's tipped. And Bo, by the way, all the tipped balls at the line of scrimmage, that's a different video for a different day. We've got to touch on that too as well because that's awful. The 3rd down play, you just don't connect. You roll out to your right, and then you call a screen pass to Cortland Sutton on 4th down and 2, and you get stopped at the line. That's entirely play calling. So there are a ton of different areas you can see this lack of balance on offense where it's not just a Bo Nix problem. It's not just a Sean Payton problem. It's an offensive identity problem. You've got to figure it out. You've got to figure out what you do well, and it can't just be, well, we play well in the 4th quarter. That's not it. You've got to find the balance. And the reason I say that is because Kansas City is coming. With the injuries to the offensive line for the LA Chargers, I'm not quite as concerned about them because they can't seem to block at all. And you can clearly see that without that offensive line, Harbaugh's offense is just not nearly as buttoned up. But Kansas City is. They are playing their very best football of the 2025 season. You cannot afford to have your quarterback's passing chart look like this against the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, there's a lot of green past the line of scrimmage, but how much of that, I will question you, was in the fourth quarter? Look at all the green behind the line of scrimmage again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 6, 7, 6, 7, 6 or 7 passes behind the line of scrimmage. And that's not even counting the passes at the line of scrimmage. That's just behind. So I think the biggest change, in my opinion, is still that you've got to stretch the ball down the field. If Sean Payton is going to continue to call plays, you've got to limit the screens. You've got to trust that Bo can make these connections downfield. And if he can't, you got to let him figure it out. You got to let him figure it out because what you're doing still isn't working. That's all I got for you on today's episode, and I hope that you don't find too much anger in this episode, but I do want to be objective. The last 2 episodes, we were very complimentary. We were talking about how Bo has the clutch gene, how this team has the clutch gene, how there's magic at Mile High, but we do have to get back down to earth and give you deep dive analysis on the Denver Broncos. That's going to do it for us on today's episode. A reminder to hit that thumbs up icon, hit that subscribe button, Mile High salute. Broncos are 5-2 at the top of the AFC West. Be cool.